Now, as we all know, the Union Finance Minister presented the budget for the year 2024-25 yesterday. And as a result, this key development has set the heart racing in the aspirants community on how to approach this development, as there are plethora of articles in today's newspaper. But have no fear, because Daily News Simplified is here. Yeah, you heard it right. I'm Ankit and I'll be discussing key highlights of the Union Budget 2024-25 today, both from economy angle as well as from polity angle. We'll start off with the economy angle by discussing key highlights such as robust economic foundation, the 9 different priorities highlighted in the budget, in addition to the facts and trends related to both expenditure as well as revenue account of the government. Also, we'll be discussing changes in tax proposals in our today's discussion. And before signing off, we'll also be covering the polity angle of the budget as to how which documents are presented along with the annual financial statement, and also what are the stages that the budget goes through before being passed by the Union Parliament. Hence, let us start our today's discussion, because as you can understand, all these 3 newspapers, that is the Hindu, Indian Express as well as the Business Line, were filled with articles related to the Union budget. And why are we discussing this in the Daily News Simplified? And this is because the GS Paper 3 syllabus highlights government budgeting. Also, from the mains examination point of view, you can see various questions every year on the topics related to budget, be it the distinguishing between capital and revenue account, or how the budget making process has changed in the post-liberalization period. Further, key developments related to changes in taxation policy were also asked. So you can see this topic becomes important from mains perspective. So let us discuss what are the robust economic foundations which has enabled the government of India to pass this year's budget or to present this year's budget. Now, as you can understand, despite various global uncertainties, India has still or was able to grow by 8.2% in the last financial year. And even according to the Reserve Bank of India's projection, India will still be able to achieve the growth rate of 7.2% in its GDP this year. So this highlights the strong foundation, that is the growth potential of Indian economy despite various global uncertainties. Also, India has witnessed improvement in its current account deficit, and this has been due to decrease in its merchandise trade deficit and also increase in its surplus of trade in services. And these two developments has enabled, or it has lowered, India's current account deficit to just 0.7% of its GDP. Also, as you can see, the economic activity in India, it is measured by a purchasing managers index. Now, if you follow this development closely, you can see that whenever the purchasing manager index, it is more than 50, it highlights expansion in economic activity. And this was reflected in developments throughout the year, and not just this year, but also previous financial year. Because developments related to both service sector as well as manufacturing, they were more than 50. That's why it highlighted that the PMI index has become expansionary for India. Also, the financial health of India's banking sector, which is reflected by the gross NPA of the scheduled commercial banks, it has also declined drastically in the past few years. And this year, it stood at about 2.8%. That is 2.8% of loans that were extended by the scheduled commercial banks, they became non-performing assets. As far as the capital of the banking sector is concerned, it has increased to 16.8% of capital adequacy ratio, or capital to risk rated ratio. So all these two factors highlight the better financial health of India's scheduled commercial banks. And why we need scheduled commercial banks? Because these banks, they extend loans for economically productive activities such as manufacturing and service sector. Also, as a result of better financial health of the government, we have seen decrease in fiscal deficit levels. Now, fiscal deficit, it reflects the total borrowing by the union government. Now, this deficit was quite high due to COVID-19 pandemic. However, fiscal consolidation after the pandemic has led to India reducing its current account deficit, fiscal deficit to just 5.6% of its GDP. Also, as far as ensuring control in inflation is concerned, India has also been able to control its headline inflation figures to the tolerance level of below 6%, which is mandated to the RBI by the government of India. However, even today, the problem related to food inflation, it currently persists. So we'll be dealing in detail how the government is trying to tackle food inflation through this year's budget announcement. Now, in this regard, let us understand what are the different priorities of the government which is highlighted in the budget. Now, the first priority as highlighted by the budget is related to the agricultural sector, which becomes important from GS paper 3 perspective as the syllabus directly highlights developments related to the agricultural sector. Now, in this regard, the government, it has highlighted that it will undertake a comprehensive review of the agricultural research setup. Now, agricultural research is key to ensure increased productivity and yields of the Indian agricultural activity. Also, it will bring focus to raising productivity and developing climate resilient varieties, which is essential to deal with menace of climate change. As you can understand, climate change has resulted into reduction in yields of our crops across various years. Also, as you can understand, India is a net importer of oil seeds and pulses. So, to reduce the dependence on imports, the government is looking to make the production of oil seeds and pulses more Atmanirbhar, that is self-sufficient. Hence, in this regard, government is undertaking efforts to encourage cultivation of mustard, groundnut, sesame, soya bean and sunflower. Also, government is looking to release new varieties of crops such as 109 high yielding varieties of various field and horticultural crops to farmers so as to enable better productivity of country's agricultural sector. Now coming up to the menace of food inflation, which you can understand is due to increased prices of vegetables all across the country. So to promote the production of vegetables and developments in its supply chain, the government is incentivizing the formation of farmer producer organizations, cooperatives and startups which make developments in vegetable supply chain in fields related to its collection, storage as well as marketing. Also, government is looking to promote a national cooperation policy which is looking to create more employment as well as increase the bargaining capacity of country's farmers in general. So all of this was related to developments in the agricultural sector. And also government is looking to promote natural farming, because right now farmers in India, they are utilizing resource intensive farming which utilize chemical fertilizers and pesticides. However, this has increased the pollution levels across the Indian economy. So to control the pollution, the government is promoting the use of natural farming, that it not just aims to control pollution, but it also aims to reduce the amount of chemical fertilizers and pesticides that are used by the farmers generally. So in this regard, 1 crore farmers across the country, they will be encouraged to undertake natural farming processes in the next 2 years, and to provide them with raw materials and inputs. 10,000 need-based bio-input resource centers will also be established. Also, as you can understand, India is a key importer of seafood crops, and last year India exported about 60,000 crores worth of seafoods. Now, out of this total seafood exports, the shrimp export, it constituted about 2/3 share in the seafood sector. So to promote production and export of shrimp, the government it is providing the farmers of shrimp producers with financing and also for processing activities through the institution called NABARD, which is a fully owned subsidiary of the Reserve Bank of India. Further, the digital public infrastructure has enabled the government to register lands, and also it has enabled the government to undertake digital crop surveys in various fields. So this development will be extended so as to enable the government to undertake digital crop surveys in as many as 400 districts. Also, this will be extended to farmers, so which will enable them to first of all have a perfect land record, and it will also enable these farmers to secure financing from formal sources like banks and NBFCs. Also, the government will issue Jan Samarth based Kisan cards to the farmers, which will provide them with working capital from both short term and long term perspective. Now, let us discuss the second priority of the government, that is the employment and skilling sector. And in this, the most notable announcement by the finance minister was the three schemes which are intended to promote employment linked incentive. Now, the scheme A, that is the first scheme, is intended for job seekers who seek job for the first time in general. And in this regard, the government wants to provide these job seekers with 1 month of wage in 3 installments, and this will be given up to 15,000 rupees. Now, this scheme is intended to benefit as many as 2.1 crore of Indian youth. Further, the second scheme is related to job creation in the manufacturing sector. And as you can see, in this regard, the government will incentivize both employees as well as employer to promote their contribution for the Employee Provident Fund organization, and the contributions will be in a specified scale for the first 4 years. And this measure is expected to benefit as many as 30 lakh of Indian youth. Further, the government will also reimburse the contributions made under the EPFO category by the employers to as much as 3,000 rupee per month for 2 years for all new hires. Now, all these are intended to benefit the youth of our country who eventually are job seekers. Also, for other industrial activity, the government is providing a skilling program which undertakes the fourth scheme in this regard. Now, in this regard, 20 lakh youth, they will be skilled over a period of 5 years through establishment of more than 1,000 of industrial training institutions, which will be set up in a hub and spoke model. Further, the course content, it will be aligned as per the industry standards, which will enable these individuals to seek former employment in a productive sector. Also, the government is looking to facilitate higher participation of women in workforce, which will ultimately increase the country's female labor force participation rates. And this incentivization is done through establishment of hostels for working women, which will be in collaboration with industries, and there will also be established creches in the formal working environment, which will enable the women to send their children to these creches. Also, for model skilling loans, the government is providing loan up to 7.5 lakh rupees, which will be guaranteed through a government promoted fund, and this measure is intended to help as much as 25,000 students every year. Further, the government is providing internship to students, which will enable these students to interact with the industry on an overall basis. Also, for students who seek or who want to undertake higher education in the country, they'll also be provided loans for up to 10 lakhs, and these loans will be provided at a reduced interest rate of 3%, which will be provided by the government in form of annual interest rate subvention. Now, these benefits will be provided by the government in form of digital e-vouchers such as e-rupee. Also, as we understood, many states such as Andhra Pradesh and Bihar, they were demanding funds from the union government, such as demand for special status. So, to alleviate their concerns, the government has also brought forward the third priority in this budget, which is inclusive development. Now, this development becomes important from GS Paper 3 perspective because this syllabus highlights inclusive growth levels in the Indian economy. So, to promote the development of eastern parts of our country, specifically Bihar, Jharkhand, West Bengal, Odisha, the government is undertaking or is trying to provide these states with greater economic opportunities. Case in point being Bihar, with as the ruling party in the Bihar is a key ally for the central government. Hence, the central government is extending various economic benefits to Bihar as well. For example, Gaya city, which is located in Bihar, will be developed as an industrial node under the Amritsar Kolkata Industrial Corridor. Further, Bihar will also be provided with road connectivity projects, developments of a 2400 megawatt power plant, as well as new airports, medical colleges, as well as creation of sports infrastructure in the state. Further, to promote women and girls, the government is allocating more than 3 lakh crores for schemes benefiting women in general. Also, as far as rural development is concerned, the government has made provision for as much as rupees 2.66 lakh crores for rural development in addition to creation of rural infrastructure. Now, as far as development of tribal section are concerned, in this regard, the government has brought forward Pradhan Mantri Janjatiya Unnat Gram Abhiyan. Now, this scheme is intended to improve the socio-economic condition of our tribal communities in India, covering as much as 63,000 village and will benefit as much as 5 crore tribal people. Further, the government is also undertaking measures to promote financial inclusion, such as establishment of 100 branches of India Post Payment Bank in the Northeast region, which, as I've already highlighted, will promote financial inclusion in the region of Northeast India. Also, as far as Andhra Pradesh is concerned, the Andhra Pradesh Reorganization Act made sure that central government extends some financial support to the new state of Andhra Pradesh. So, in this regard, the government has extended a financial support of 15,000 crores for this financial year, in addition to support for completion of Polavaram irrigation project and also establishing infrastructure such as water, power, railways and roads in two industrial nodes, that is Kopatti node, which is located in Vishakhapatnam Chennai industrial corridor, and also Orvakal node, which is located in Hyderabad Bangalore industrial corridor. Now let us discuss the fourth priority of the government, which is manufacturing and service sector. Now this development becomes important from GS paper 3 perspective because the syllabus highlighted the changes in industrial policy of the government. Now in this regard, the micro, small and medium enterprises, they are very crucial for the Indian economy as far as Indian economy is concerned. Why? Because this sector is responsible for providing employment to as much as 11.1 crore people. It accounts for about 30% of India's GDP. Further, the MSME sector, it accounts for 45% of country's manufacturing activity and 48% of total exports out of India. So based on these figures, you can understand the importance of MSME from Indian economy perspective. And recognizing this importance, the government has extended the financial benefits to the MSME sector. Case in point, there is this credit guarantee scheme for MSME in the manufacturing sector, which will enable these MSME funds to undertake loans which will be guaranteed by the government for as much as 100 crore rupees. Further, the government is promoting a new assessment model for MSME credit, which will enable the banks to not just gauge their turnover or asset levels, but also undertake the assessment of their digital presence before extending the loans to MSME sector. Also, MSME sector, they face liquidity crisis in general, which is due to lack of immediate payments by the service takers of the MSME sector. In this regard, these companies, they issue invoices to MSMEs which can be traded on TRDS portal. Now, the scope of companies who are eligible to participate in this TRDS portal, it was extended by reducing the turnover limited. So this has enabled as much as 22 more PSUs as well as 7,000 companies to register themselves on the TREDS portal, that is Trade Receivables Delivery System portal. Further, as MSMEs, they take loans under the Mudra scheme, and the highest category is categorized as Tarun category, which enables any entrepreneur to take loans up to 10 lakhs. Now, if any entrepreneur who has taken loans previously of as much as 10 lakhs and it has returned those loans timely, then this budget has announced that the turnover limit or the loan limit will be doubled by the amount of 20 lakhs for all those entrepreneurs who have timely returned their earlier loans. Further, these MSMEs, they will also be provided with quality testing infrastructure, which will enable them to market their products to more and more export markets. Because as you can understand, many countries, they impose non-tariff barriers such as sanitary and phytosanitary measures, and due to lack of adequate quality testing, these MSMEs, they fail to qualify for export markets. Also, MSMEs, they will be extended with credit support even during the stress period, that is the period of special mention account, which means the MSMEs have been unable to return loans between the period of 0 to 90 days. So as to prevent these SMA loans to becoming NPA, the government is intended to extend credit support to these MSME sector enterprises. Further, to undertake various other developments in the manufacturing sector, the government is offering internship opportunities to students for in as much as 500 top companies in India for a period of 5 years. Now, in this regard, the allowances to these interns will also be provided to as much as 5,000 rupees per month, along with a one-time assistance of rupees 6,000 rupees, which will be provided by these very companies through their corporate social responsibility funds. Further, the government is also undertaking developments of 12 industrial parks under the National Industrial Corridor Development Program. Additionally, as you can see, even the rental housing with the dormitory type accommodation will also be provided to workers who are engaged in manufacturing sector so as to provide them with adequate housing services. Also, India is witnessing increased demand of critical minerals because these critical minerals are used in electronics as well as defense sector. So to reduce the import dependency of these minerals of India, India is looking to develop a critical minerals mission which will promote domestic production, recycling and overseas acquisition of various mineral assets by the company called Kabil. Also, to promote ease of entry and exit into the corporate sector, the government, it brought forward insolvency and bankruptcy code in the year 2016. So as to make this process more and more efficient, the government is strengthening the tribunal and appellate tribunal system under this insolvency and bankruptcy code, which will reduce the pendency and it will also make the process more and more efficient. Now let us discuss the next priority of the government in this regard, that is the urban development sector. Now, this development becomes important from GS paper 1 perspective because the syllabus highlights urbanization. Now, in this regard, the government is undertaking development of its cities, such as making these cities as growth hubs. Now, in this regard, the government is promoting transit oriented development, which means development of public transport in close vicinity to both industrial, commercial, as well as residential complexes. Now, this development, that is TOD, it is intended to promote public transport as well as reduce congestion in countries' urban areas. So, in this regard, the government is introducing transit oriented development plans for as many as 14 large cities, which will cover a population of more than 30 lakhs. Further, to promote these street vendors from undertaking economic activities, government previously brought PM Swanidhi scheme, which extended these street hawkers and vendors with working capital. So, based on the success of this particular scheme, the government is also envisioning a scheme to develop as many as 100 weekly haats or markets, which will promote as a street food hubs in selected cities, which will provide more and more employment activities to countries' informal street vendors and hawkers. Further, government is also reducing stamp duty on properties which are purchased by women so as to promote developments for women in general in urban areas. Now, as far as housing needs are concerned, the government is coming up with PM Awas Yojana and its second version, which will cater to the needs of 1 crore urban poor and middle class families with an investment of as much as 10 lakh crore rupees. Now, under this scheme, incentives will be provided in form of interest subventions on loans which are undertaken to establish housing complexes in general. Further, to people who are unable or unwilling to buy permanent houses in cities, they can even rent an accommodation themselves, as government is looking to enable policies and regulation for efficient and transparent rental housing markets in the country. Now, by enabling policies, the government is looking to increase supply of rental accommodation, which will accommodate people who move from rural to urban areas in seek of employment opportunities. Now, government is also looking to promote energy security in India. Now, why do we need energy security? Because countries undertaking rapid economic growth, it aims to generate employment, and it also tries to reduce the environment pressure, which is as a result of resource intensive energy generation such as thermal power plants. So, government, it is undertaking initiatives such as rooftop solar activity, which we'll see in next slide, and also government is looking to ramp up its energy storage infrastructure, which will enable the government to store more and more renewable energy. As you can understand, these renewable energy, they are intermittent in nature, which means the round clock availability of renewable energy is currently absent. Case in point, the solar energy. Because solar energy, as you can understand, is only generated during the day. So, to store excess energy, you need storage facilities which will enable to reduce the intermittency issues and also will enable renewable energy availability across the 24-hour cycle. Further, government is also undertaking development of an ultimate supercritical thermal power plant, which will be undertaken as a joint venture between National Thermal Power Corporation as well as Bharat Heavy Engineering Limited, as these companies will establish a full-scale 800 megawatt commercial plant based on high efficient thermal power. Now, this initiative is looking to promote efficiency of thermal power and also to reduce the pollution level, which are quite high as well as thermal power plants are concerned. Also, government is undertaking developments in the nuclear energy field, as government is looking to set up small sized Bharat small reactors. And also to promote research and development, government is extending support to the private sector as well. Now, regards to MSME sector, which you can understand, as I've already highlighted before, is a key development or a key important sector as far as Indian industry is concerned. So, to make these MSMEs more and more energy efficient, the government is providing them with financial support to shift to cleaner forms of energy. Further, the government will also facilitate investment grade energy audit in as many as 60 clusters of MSME, which will be extended later on to as many as 100 clusters. Now, the second aspect of energy security. As I've already highlighted, the government is promoting establishment of solar rooftop project, which will enable the citizens of our country to generate electricity themselves, that is solar electricity. Now, in the interim budget, the government, it announced PM Surya Ghar Muft Bijli Yojana, which is looking to provide as much as 1 crore households with the provision to generate free electricity up to 300 units per month. Now, as far as this scheme is concerned, as many as 1.28 crore registrations were taken place and 14 lakh applications were received by the government so far. So all you can understand from this chapter is that government is looking to increase its energy security through developments in renewable energy sector, development of storage infrastructure, and also reducing the emission intensity of thermal plants as well as MSME sector. Now let us move to the next priority, that is the infrastructure sector, which becomes again important from GS paper 3 perspective because the syllabus directs highlight infrastructure. Now in this regard, government has made a highest provision for infrastructure sector, which accounts for as much as 3.4% of India's GDP. Now this is the spending of union government on infrastructure. But to promote spending of state governments as well, the government of India is extending loans up to 1.5 lakh crores as in interest-free form to state governments to support resource allocation or allocation in the country's infrastructure sector. Now also to improve connectivity between various rural areas, government is also bringing phase 4 of Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, which will provide all-weather connectivity to as much as 25,000 rural habitations. Now these rural habitations, they have increased in population and have become eligible to be funded under the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana. Now as far as efforts to mitigate floods and irrigation support, the government is looking to extend supports to various states such as to Bihar under financial support for Kosi Mechi intrastate link, and also the support for flood management will be extended to states such as Assam, Sikkim as well as Uttarakhand. Whereas for reconstruction and rehabilitation of people who were affected by flood events in the state of Himachal Pradesh, the government is also extending them with financial assistance. Also, the government is undertaking huge development of tourism sector. Why? Because this tourism sector not just generates employment, but is also enabled to generate more and more foreign currency income for the Indian government. So in this regard, the government is undertaking development of 2 corridors in the state of Bihar, modeled on the lines of Kashi Vishwanath corridor, which is located in the city of Varanasi of Uttar Pradesh. Now these corridors will be taken or undertaken in cities of both Gaya and Gaya, and these are extended to the state of Bihar in addition to comprehensive development initiative for areas which is located in Rajgir. Also, as you can understand from recent developments, the government is also supporting development of Nalanda as a tourist center in addition to establishment of Nalanda University. Further, the government is also providing assistance to the state of Odisha for undertaking various developments in its wildlife sanctuaries, natural landscapes, as well as monuments and craftsmanship. Now let us discuss the next development or next priority which is located or related to innovation, research and development. Now this topic becomes important from GS paper 3 perspective, such as related to developments of the field of science and technology. Now as you can understand, the government is providing increased fund under the Anusandhan National Research, which will enable the government to fund for basic research and prototype development. Now, this will benefit immensely to the country's manufacturing sector, which needs to undertake basic research before undertaking prototype development. Now, I'm sorry. Now, by undertaking prototype development, these units they are enabled or they are eligible to then undertake mass manufacturing of their prototypes. Further, the government is also undertaking private sector research driven and innovation, and it will finance through a pool of rupees 1 lakh crores. Further, the government is also promoting investment in country's space sector, and this will be done through a venture capital fund of which will be set up valued at rupees 1000 crore rupees. Now let us discuss the last priority, which is related to the next generation reform. Now this is important from GS paper 3 perspective, which highlighted the benefits of liberalization in the Indian economy. Now the first liberalization process, it was undertaken in the year 1991 in form of liberalization, privatization and globalization. So the next generation reforms will be related to factors of production, which are land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, as well as technology. So let us understand what are the developments related to land sector. Now in this regard, the government has announced policy for both rural and urban related land issues, such as providing rural areas with unique land parcel identification number, undertaking survey of map subdivisions, and also linkaging the farmers registries to their own land. And this will increase the flow of funds of the formal sector in countries' rural development. Because currently, as farmers, they do not have a land right, hence they are unable to mortgage these lands to take loans from countries' formal financial sector. So as to reduce their dependence on informal loans, the government is undertaking developments in countries' rural land related reforms. As far as urban lands are concerned, the government will be providing land records in digitized format, which will be mapped with GIS infrastructure. Also, the government is undertaking digitization of cadastral maps, in addition to establishment of land registry, which will also reduce the issues related to land acquisitions. Further, related to other forms of factors of production, the government is providing labor sector with portals such as eShram portal, which will enable countries' laborers to link with their prospective employees. Also, to simplify the regulatory process, the government is undertaking developments and renovation of Shram Suvidha platform, and also Samadhan platform, which is currently used to address the grievances of countries' labor workers. So all these developments, that is linking of eShram platforms with other employers, undertaking development of both Shram Suvidha, which will simplify the labor compliances, and also the Samadhan platform, which will enable redressal of grievances of labor, are constituted under labor reforms of the next generation reforms. Now let us deal with reforms under these capital, entrepreneurship and tech related sectors. Now in this regard, the government has launched, as you can see, the government is looking to provide climate finances to countries' industrial sector so as to enable them to adapt and mitigate with challenges related to climate change. Further, the government is also looking to promote foreign direct investment and overseas investment, such as simplifying the FDI norms and also liberalizing how much amount of money can be invested by foreign investors in different sectors of economy. Additionally, to provide financial securities to countries minor, the government is coming up with NPS Vatsalya Yojana, which provides for contribution by parents and guardians for minors. And after completion of their age, these accounts will be then transferred into a normal NPS account. Further, government is undertaking improvement in data governance, collection, processing, and management of data and statistics, which is overall intended to provide ease of doing business in India. So these were the priorities that have been undertaken by the government and were highlighted by the finance minister in her speech yesterday. Now, in this regard, let us understand what are the key trends in countries' expenditure account. Now, as you can understand, for every rupee that is spent by the government, as much as 21% it is given to states in form of their share in taxes and duties. Further, finance commission and other transfers, which include grant in aid, which are provided to the states under the Article 275, also accounts for as much as 9% of total spending by the government. Now also, government is spending as much as 19% of its spending on interest payments on loans which are extended by the government from time to time. Also, as far as central sector schemes are concerned, which are 100% financed by the central government, the government is spending as much as 16% of its total fund, which is followed by centrally sponsored scheme at 8%, defense sector spending at 8%, and subsidies at 6% in general. Now, there have been a recent concern by most of the states that the total spending by the government and these allocation of these spendings to different states have reduced. However, this year's budget highlights or it tries to highlight or it tries to reduce this miscommunication. Because as you can see from this graph, the amount of total transfers which are made to states and union territories by the central government has more than doubled in the last 6 years. Also, the composition of these transfers to state and union territories, they constitute devolution of net tax proceeds, which are devolved under the recommendation of Finance Commission. In addition to schemes related and other transfers, such as transfers related to centrally sponsored scheme and other Finance Commission grants which are extended under Article 275 of the Indian Constitution. Now, the highest percent of transfers, it accounts for devolution, which is followed by spending on schemes, and this is followed by grants which are extended by the Finance Commission under Article 275. Also, as far as major items are concerned, the highest amount of expenditure by the government is done on the defense sector, followed by rural development, then on agricultural, then on home affairs and education. Now, let us understand what are the expenditure of major items in Indian sector. And most of the highlighted expenditures is on subsidies provided by the union government. Now, from this table, you can understand the government is providing three kinds of subsidies, that are subsidies on fertilizers, food, as well as petroleum. Now, the decreasing order of these subsidies is food subsidy, followed by fertilizer subsidy, followed by petroleum subsidy. Now, the trends of the union government as far as allocation under these subsidies are concerned, you can see the allocation have reduced throughout this year, and the fertilizer subsidies have reduced mainly due to cooling off prices of natural gas, which are key ingredients of fertilizers. Now, this reduction of government spending on fertilizers was also highlighted in today's Indian Express. As you can see, the outgo subsidies of the government has reduced drastically in the past few years, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, also allocation as far as major schemes are concerned, government has increased budget for Manrega, undertaking research and development projects, nuclear power projects, as well as for PLI scheme for pharmaceutical sector. Also, government is undertaking development of semiconductors and display manufacturing, for which the government has increased the allocation by more than 2 times. Further, the government is undertaking developments to increase its renewable energy generation capacity. Hence, government has made more allocation, that is more than twice allocation for solar power connectivity to its own grid. Further, the government is giving more benefits to households under the direct benefit transfers for the liquefied petroleum gases. Now, in this regard, let us understand what are the various tax proposals of the government. Because the earlier part of our discussion related to the expenditures will be made by the central government. Now, this second part deals with the revenue sources of the union government, which is generally made by the government through tax proposals. Now, the government is undertaking a comprehensive review of tax structure so as to provide ease of trade, removal of duty inversion, as well as reduction in disputes. Now, in this regard, the government is looking to reduce its custom duties so as to promote local value addition, domestic manufacturing, as well as promote trade competitiveness of its exports. So you can understand the changes that the government has made in its custom duty structure is all looking to promote local value addition, increasing manufacturing, as well as enhancing the trade competitiveness of Indian goods in export markets. For example, the government has exempted cancer medicine from custom duties, which enables manufacturing of affordable medicines, which again can be exported to Western nations. In addition to reducing the custom duties on components which are used to manufacture mobile industry. Further, government is looking to reduce duties on gold and silver, which provides fillip to the country's jewelry sector, which is a key sector as far as Indian exports are concerned. Further, by reducing the duties on shrimp, government is looking to promote exports of seafood. In addition to manufacturing of solar cells and panel, which will support country's energy transition and also reduction of imports of solar cells. Further, to reduce custom duties on 25 critical minerals, government is also looking to boost country's strategic sectors such as electronic industry as well as defense sector. Now let us deal with direct taxes, and in this regard the government has highlighted that it will undertake a comprehensive review of its Income Tax Act of the year 1961 so as to reduce litigation as well as pendency of tax disputes. Further, the finance minister also simplified the charities and TDS which are extended to charitable sectors, in addition to making simplification in litigation and appeal sector. Further, the government, it is also looking to deepen tax base of our country as it has increased the security transaction taxes on equity transactions over futures and options, in addition to increasing the taxes on buyback of shares. Now, these measures are intended to reduce the volatility in countries' equity markets, because as you can see, the futures and options have been widely utilized by traders, which have made them more and more financially vulnerable. So, by introducing or increasing the securities transaction tax, the government is trying to disincentivize the trade in futures and options. Further, the government has trying to reduce the compliance burden on countries' startups, which will promote their entrepreneurial spirit. And in this regard, the government has undertaken the rationalization of capital gains. And by this, the government has increased the short-term capital gains tax, in addition to increasing the long tax as well. Further, the government has also increased the limit of exemption which are provided for capital gains to as much as 1.2 lakh per year. Also, to promote employment and investment, especially under startups, the government has abolished angel tax for all classes of investors. Further, by bringing a simplified tax regime for domestic cruise operators, it is looking to promote cruise tourism in the country. Further, by providing safe harbor rates to foreign mining companies, it will enable these mining companies to sell raw diamonds into Indian market, which will again enable companies to export more and more polished diamonds into other export markets. Also, to promote foreign investment, the government has reduced the corporate tax on foreign companies from 40 to 35%. Additionally, the government has also looking to make the new tax regime more and more attractive. Now, in this regime, the government has undertaken rationalization of tax structure in order to make this regime more and more attractive. Further, the government has extended the standard deduction which are provided to salaried employees from 50,000 to 75,000, in addition to providing deduction on family pension for pensioners from 15 to 25,000. Now, all these new direct tax proposals, according to government, will result into increased saving of as much as 17.5 thousand rupees, which will again increase the disposable income of country's household. Now, by increasing the disposable income, the government is looking to increase the consumption and savings level in the Indian economy. Now, based on this, let us understand wherever the rupee earned by the government of India comes from. Now, the highest share of income for the government is through borrowings and other liabilities, which you can see accounts for more than 1/4 of the total income. Further, as far as taxes are concerned, the share of income tax in government earnings, it is higher than the indirect taxes such as GST and other direct taxes such as corporate taxes. Further, the government, as you can understand, it shot up its fiscal deficit target. Now, fiscal deficit means the net difference between total expenditure with revenue receipt and non-debt capital receipts. So you can say, in other words, fiscal deficit indicates the total borrowing of the government. Now, this level of borrowing, it increased in the financial year of 2021, because you guessed it right, it was the year of COVID-19 pandemic. Now, due to impact of pandemic and its related lockdown, it resulted into lowering of revenue income of the government, in addition to increasing of expenditures of the government on country's social sector, providing food to poor, as well as cost incurred on providing people with vaccines. So, because of this reduced revenue and increased expenditure, you can see the deficit targets of fiscal deficit, revenue deficit, effective revenue deficit, which is revenue deficit minus loans extended to states for capital expenditure, as well as primary deficit, which is fiscal deficit minus the interest payments by the government. Now, all these deficits, they are somewhat indicative of how much money the government is borrowing. So you can see the government borrowed quite a lot of money in the financial year of 2021. However, to encourage investment in the economy, the government, it highlighted that it will undertake the path of fiscal consolidation, which means lowering of the deficit levels in an economy. And this even was continued in this year's budget, because the government highlighted that it will reduce its fiscal deficit to just 4.59% of its GDP, and it will further reduce it to 4.5% of GDP next financial year. So this highlights that the deficit trends, after it shot up in the financial year of 2021, it has reduced drastically after that due to a path of fiscal consolidation. Now, as far as sources of deficit financing is concerned, in this regard, the government is relying more and more on market borrowings, that is, borrowing under the route of issuing of long term government securities. Further, from this table, you can see that the market borrowings under the government's securities, it is highest share of country's total borrowing, and the short term borrowings which are undertaken through issuing of treasury bills, they are under the negative category. Further, external debt which are sourced in foreign currencies, it is also quite low, as it is only 0.9% of total fiscal deficit levels of the government. So because of this low reliance on short term borrowings and external debt, it highlights the stabilities of country's fiscal deficit in general, because most of the borrowings of the government, it's been done through funds which are provided by provident funds, pension funds, and also financial sector institutions like banks, which are stable in nature. Further, as government is relying more on long term borrowing, it has reduced the risk of repayment issue. Further, as government is relying more on internal sources of debt rather than external debt, it has also reduced the exchange rate risk of India's total borrowing. So these are the highlights related to sources of deficit financing. And with this, we move to trends in tax receipts. Now, as you can see, after the year 2021, all the succeeding years have seen higher income from direct taxes as against indirect taxes, which highlight that first of all, India's taxation regime is more progressive, because direct taxes are levied more on higher income classes, and also India's tax to GDP ratio of 11.8% is highest in the recent future, which again highlights increase in percentage of GDP growth. So as far as collection of direct taxes are concerned, they have increased and they have resulted in more of direct tax collection than compared to collection from indirect taxes. Now also government is looking to increase its capital expenditure from past few years, which you can see from this graph. Now, why is government undertaking capital expenditure? Because it is looking to create more and more infrastructure, be it road, airports, ports, and also this capital expenditure has a more multiplier effect on economy, that it creates more and more employment in both direct as well as indirect employment. Further, the infrastructure which is created through capital expenditure can be also harnessed by the country's manufacturing sector in general. So these are the trends that country's capital expenditure by the union government has increased in recent times. Now also the developments related to union budget are also important from prelims perspective. Case in point, this PYQ of different year prelims, as you can see, question appeared on the polity aspect, on economy aspect, as also what are the duties of the government as far as presentation of budget is concerned. So in this regard, let us understand what are the key budget documents that are presented in the parliament alongside the speech of finance minister. Now government under the article 112 of the constitution is mandated to present an annual financial statement in parliament of the India. Now this is done every year, usually on 1st of Feb every year. However, this year being an election year, hence the government it only presented an interim budget in the 1st of February, and after returning into power in general election, yesterday government came up with a full budget which is known as annual financial statement. Now this article also highlights that government should differentiate between its revenue account from other expenditures such as capital expenditure, and we'll look into the difference between these two accounts in the next slide. Also, as government is presenting the budget in the house, it also requires the government to spend money from the various accounts of India. And these accounts are Consolidated Fund of India, Public Account of India, as well as Contingency Fund of India. Now, to spend money from Consolidated Fund of India, government requires permission of the floor of the house, that is permission of the Lok Sabha. In this regard, the government presents various expenditures in form of demand of grants, which are then presented to the floor of the house, and the parliament then decides to pass this demand for grants, which enables the government to spend money from this Consolidated Fund of India. Now, also to spend money, you also require the government to be able to earn money from various sources. So, in this regard, the government comes up with a finance bill which is mandated under the Article 110 of the Indian Constitution. Now, this finance bill, which is usually presented in a form of money bill under the Article 110A, it enables the government to levy sources of taxes on its country's population. Further, as you can understand, these three are constitutionally mandated on the government. However, alongside budget, the government also comes up with fiscal policy statements which are mandated statutorily under the Fiscal Responsibilities Budget Management, which is abbreviated as FRBM Act of the year 2023. Now, according to this act, alongside the budget documents, the government should also present a macroeconomic framework statement and also a medium term fiscal policy strategy statement. So you can understand the first three statements are mandated on the government from the constitution itself, whereas this fourth document, which is set of two documents, these are mandated by a statute called FRBM Act of the year 2023. Now, all these other submissions made by the government are looking to enhance the presentation of the budget, that is to simplify the presentation of the budget. So you can understand these are the key documents which enables the government to present budget every year. Now, as I have already highlighted, under Article 112 of the Constitution, the government in its budget, that is annual financial statement, must differentiate between its revenue spending with respect to other spending as well. So in this regard, let us understand the difference between revenue budget on one hand and capital budget on the other hand. Now, as you can understand, this revenue budget, the receipts under the revenue account, it accounts for non-redeemable receipts, which means the receipt which government undertakes into the revenue account is not liable on the government of India to pay it back. So, for example, tax revenue which is collected by the government, both direct and indirect, such as DST and income tax, they are examples of revenue receipts in addition to other non-tax revenues such as interest which it receives from various loans that it extends, and also the dividends and profit which are given to the government by public sector undertakings. Further, any external grants that the government receives from other countries are also categorized under the revenue receipts. Also, the expenditures made by the government in day-to-day activities such as pension, interest payments, salaries, pensions, all of these are categorized as an example of revenue expenditure. Now, as against revenue expenditure, there comes capital receipts and expenditures. For example, any receipts which creates a liability on the government, such as loans that it takes, they are categorized as a capital receipt. Now, examples include debt receipts such as market borrowing and also non-debt receipts such as incomes from disinvestment proceeds as well as recovery of loans which is made to the other governments also. Also, as far as capital expenditure are concerned, which are non-recurring in nature, for example, expenditures incurred on creation of various assets, they are examples of capital expenditures of the government. For example, whenever government spends on creation of roads, railways, as well as loans to states, they are example of capital expenditure. Now let us understand what are the various stages through which the budget is passed in the parliament. Now yesterday the finance minister, she presented the budget on the floor of the house, that is Lok Sabha. Now after this budget is presented by the finance minister, it is subjected to a general discussion on the floor of the house, and after the general discussion is complete, the parliament goes into recess. Now, during these recess, the budget is referred to various standing departmental committees which are specifically formed to assess and scrutinize the various aspects of budget. Now, in their reports, these department committees, they recommend to vote for demand for grants, which are then voted upon exclusively in the Lok Sabha of Indian Parliament. Now, after the votes are individually voted upon, these votes then constitute into passage of appropriation bill, which enables the government to spend money from consolidated fund of India. Now, as I've already highlighted, to spend money, government needs to earn money. So it does through passage of finance bill, which is passed as a money bill, and it enables the government to levy various form of taxes and other non-tax revenue sources. And after the passage of finance bill, the union budget stands to be passed by the union parliament. So these were the 6 stages. That first, the budget is presented in the Lok Sabha by the finance minister, which is subjected to general discussion. Now, after the Lok Sabha goes into recess, these budgets, they are referred to different standing committees of various departments of the government. Now, these committees, they scrutinize in detail about the various aspects of budget, and in their report, they recommend for voting of demands for these grants, which are then voted upon in the floor of Lok Sabha. Now, after the grants are passed individually, they are then passed as an appropriation bill, which enables the government to make expenditures from consolidated fund of India. Whereas to earn money, that is to secure revenue sources, the government passes a finance bill, which is passed as a money bill, and it enables the government to sources and to levy taxes on various population. So this was all for today's discussion in the union budget of the year 2022. And we'll see you again tomorrow at 6 p.m. with the analysis of tomorrow's newspaper. So until then, I bid you a very good night.